Okay, so first of all, just a very warm welcome to you all for coming to this morning's CPD and hopefully for the remaining 3 sessions. So first of all, I want to just extend a sincere thanks to Claire for giving over so much of her time, both preparing for these sessions, because this has been going on for quite a while, and for delivering them for us. I know from the amount of interest we had from the outset, both from members and non-members of the IAI, there's a huge appetite for this CPD and demand to be here. I'd also just like to extend a thanks to the National Monument Service and to the Heritage Council, as they fund our CPD programmes and are the reason why we're able to do these today. So I'm going to hand over to you, Claire, and let you get on with things, I suppose.
Okay, everybody. What I've done at the bottom is I've put my email address there. I want all of you to do 2 things. One is to contact me. I know many of you, obviously, but I want all of you to be able to contact me and say, look, I have this, I have that, I don't understand this. This is a session of continuing professional development, okay? And therefore, I want you to develop. And it will develop me as well. It will give me enough information to write up a booklet. But there may be things that I think I know very well and I think everybody else knows. And I need you to tell me if I've missed out something or if I am missing out something. I'm going to go through some pieces that I have outlined, but anything that comes up on a regular basis, I will incorporate that further down the line. I will be doing some speaking. I will be doing some video. I will be doing some various different things like that. But there needs to be question and answer. As far as possible, we need to try and have it as an adult discussion group. It's not a competition. It's not a secret society. It's not who does better than somebody else. It's we all need to learn this material on a very basic level, and keep the special things for the specialist, pieces that are found very occasionally, which don't affect the overall site. Okay, they enhance, but they don't affect the overall site, and you need to remember that. I had written down very, very briefly my aims within this, and if I click on here, I get the next one. Okay, so this is our session today. I want to go through the aims and potential outcomes of the course, and you may have other outcomes that you want to have from it. I need to know what they are, so that whatever I present needs to be informed by what you need. I can simply present what I've presented always, but I don't know whether that's enough for you or whether there's something different that you need. So today what I'm going to do is an introduction and a historical context. And I should have written the word context in big sparkly letters if I knew how to do big sparkly letters. We will come back to context on a regular basis, and you must take that on board. So we're going to do that for the first bit. The second bit will be ethnographic examples. Hopefully that will work. I have a DVD which is about 20 minutes and very interesting. If that doesn't work, I've sent Niamh 2 YouTubes which are about 20 minutes altogether, which show a deal of material. And then in the third session, I want to go through some of the material that I have on the handouts that I sent you, the provenance, where the pottery comes from, how you decide where the pottery comes from, and a short bibliography to get you started. And in everything, discussions, okay? In everything, discussions. Why? What do you do that? What are you going to do? Where is that? Why is this happening there, okay? In the other sessions, what I have at the moment lined up, okay, are a general knowledge of medieval and post-medieval pottery. I would like you to know that at the end of these 4 sessions. The reason for that is, and I come back to it every single time, I had material sent to me, one single shard sent to me from a company whose name fortunately has been blanked from my memory. Otherwise, their name would be up on the board and I would be sticking darts in it on a regular basis. They had finished the site, they had wrapped it all up, they had written the report and they'd handed it in. And somebody then finally realized, gosh, there was a piece of pottery that they should have had something done on it. And so what they did was they sent me the single shard of pottery and their report, and they were very proud of what they'd done. And so they should be. It was a nicely excavated and well washed and numbered piece of pottery. Unfortunately, what they had done was the piece of pottery was the single piece of dating evidence from this site. And the whole report maintained that this was a ring fort dating to the 9th, 10th century. And this was a piece of medieval pottery in it. Now, firstly, you're not getting medieval pottery in the 9th, 10th century ring forts. And secondly, it was a piece of glazed red earthenware, which dates from the late 17th to the 19th century. Okay, that must not happen. That must not happen on a very simple basis. If that is your only, and in fact, even if it's not your only piece of evidence, you must get an identification of your piece of pottery ASAP. Now, some of you already do that, and I've always made myself available to have you send me a picture on the iPad. I'm not great on the phone. Send me a picture on the iPad, and if I can, I will tell you what it is right there and then. And you can work on from there. But if not, you should be able to identify the material. And I would hope at the end of this, at the very basic minimum, you will be able to tell what is medieval and what is not medieval, what is post-medieval, okay? You might even be able to sort of put to one side what is prehistoric. I know that most of you who have taken archaeology in university will have worked with prehistoric pottery, but the actual fact is that much of the excavations, most of the excavations we've been doing over the last 30 years are in both road schemes, but also within the cities. And you're not going to get an awful lot of Neolithic pottery or Bronze Age pottery in the cities. You may find a bit, but that doesn't really come into our purview here. I want to be able to show you how to quantify the pottery, simple ways of quantifying the pottery. And I have had those verified by one of the main people in England, now sadly dead, John Hurst. Simplify quantifying and make sure that it's done consistently right across what you're doing so that everybody knows when you've written a report, they know what's coming up, they know how many shards you have, they know how many vessels you think you have, and how many you definitely have, and what form those vessels are in. And a simple, easy way to work with that. I want to be sure that you have a closer identification of the principal medieval pottery types in Ireland. They're very straightforward. It's no big deal, okay? There are 3 main types of glazed ware, and there's 2 main types of unglazed ware. And surely with 5 bits on every hand, surely with 4 fingers and a thumb, you should be able to, and if not, you can use your feet. You should be able to count to 5. And if you can find those 5 in what you're doing, then you should be okay, okay? You will find other pieces, you will find other bits and pieces, but as I say, many of those are incidental rather than life-changing, okay? They are not the core value of what is actually on the site. They enhance the site. They may say that somebody has visited overseas. They may do all of these different things, but your 3 basics are the ones you need to know, okay? I will do a session on preparing for license eligibility interview. Many of you have already gone through that already, but you may have somebody in your company who's coming up for it, and you will be then in a better position to assist them in what they're doing, to be able to concentrate on how you're actually identifying the pieces of pottery, not to get flustered with it. Nobody's trying to catch you out. Really, nobody's trying to catch you out in the interview. They're testing you. Okay, they just want to see, do you know it? Okay, can you reason it out? Can you work with it? I will do a session on preparing the pottery to send to specialists. Okay, I'm already taking tablets for high blood pressure, and very often these tablets are under real strain because material comes into me, and either the pottery is absolutely filthy and nobody's done anything about it, and says, when I ask them, they say, oh yeah, we wanted you to identify it and then we were going to wash it and number it. Great. It's not that I have a problem getting my hands dirty. I certainly don't. I can't see what it is. Even I can't see through the dirt. And then you will have people who have over-processed and have essentially archived the material, being very faithful to what is or what was requested from the National Museum, have bagged within bags, within bags, within bags. I am strongly against the use of overuse of plastic bags, and that's not what you should be doing before when it's being sent to the specialist. That is a process along the way. When it comes back to you, I can't stop you from overbagging it to go to the National Museum, but please don't do it before you send it to the specialist, because they don't want to see it like that. They want to be able to get access. When you spend when you quote for an assemblage and you have to spend a full extra day simply unbagging the material, it's not acceptable. We'll do a session on the potential for dating, and that is dating the pottery rather than dating your site. Okay, we'll talk about dating your site as well. And for food processing, which is something that's coming up much more importantly now, being able to decipher what is in what the pot was used for, beg your pardon. And some of that is on the sheets that I had Niamh sent out to you. We will talk about illustrations and photography, should you, what is necessary. Very often I will send back a report and I will have the pieces selected out to one side, and then the report will come out and I find that material has been drawn that is meaningless. It has no meaning whatsoever. There's absolutely pointless having illustrated it, because it isn't laid out the right way, or it's laid out the way many of the older reports were, where they illustrated every single sherd, not necessarily laid in the way that the vessel would have worked. And so very often, while you might have 20 different jugs, if you might only illustrate 3, where you can actually put the pieces together and show the complete jug, or you can show with hatching lines, you can show where the pieces fit onto a jug, and you can get a bit better picture there. And then very occasionally, photography can illuminate something, especially in post-medieval pottery, where you have colors, and you can do color drawing, you can do hatching and shading and dotting and stippling and so on. Personally, I've never liked it. And with photography now getting so much better and really not quite so expensive to work with, it's better to have a photograph. The specialist list, as they say in Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? You need to have a specialist list That's a requirement really for the license eligibility interview as well. You need to have a specialist list that if you don't know what it is, who do you contact? Who is the person you contact? And it depends where you are around the country. For example, here in Cork, for prehistoric pottery, I would go to, or I would have gone always to Rose Cleary, because she was in the department with me. And I would simply bring it to her and I'd say, look, doesn't feel like one of mine. And that's not very objective or anything like that. It's a very subjective thing. It just doesn't feel like mine. I don't feel that it's, and she would say, yeah, it's a piece of, it's a grubby piece of Bronze Age, but it's nothing great. But that's what it is on the site. Okay. There's some essential references, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the shorter part of the bibliography I've given you already, but also how to reference. You're all great, and I know you all do your things right, but recent reports that I've seen published are referencing, they're referencing me, and I didn't do it, okay? Maurice Hurley, who taught me early on, and I'm very fortunate that he did, his answer to references was, were you there and did you see it happening? Okay. And if you didn't, who is the person that saw it happening? Who is the person that wrote this, who identified this, who put the name on it? Who is that person? That is the person that you reference. Okay. Not where you lifted the information from in a previous report. And that is unfortunately what is happening too often. It's a lazy way to do it, to simply say, Claire says that Ham Green pottery comes from just outside Bristol. Well, actually, she doesn't. She says that Ken Barton says that that's where it does. And the reason she references Ken Barton is because Ken Barton dug it. He dug that area and he wrote the first report on it, and he did all the drawings. So that's how you reference, okay? And I'm not treating you like children, but I am disturbed at some of the material that comes through. We have to deal with the tricky question of retention or disposal of pottery. And we will come to that later on. We've had some discussions recently with the CPD from the National Museum, and we need to think about that very seriously, about what we're actually doing, and how we do it, how we start a site, how we find out the material that's on the site, and where we, what we do right at the start, how we come up with a methodology for the site before we actually start. What are we going to keep? Bring the specialist in at that stage, and come up with a reasonable and a reasoned method for actually doing what is planned. And then finally, preparing the pottery for deposition in the National Museum of Ireland. There are certain ways that they want the material packaged and so on. And it's useful then to keep material to one side that you think might go on exhibition, that might be suitable for them, and you need to highlight that with them rather than packing it away in the boxes. You discuss it with them and say, look, this is a really fabulous piece that we have. The specialist has said that this is a very rare piece. This may be something that you would like to include in the medieval exhibition. It's a slightly better one than the one that you have already. Or it's a complementary one, or maybe the other half of the piece that you have already. Okay, so be aware of that, and be aware to sit down and discuss the material with the powers that be in the National Museum. Okay, that's what we're planning on doing. Some of the things we're planning on doing in the next 3 sessions. Okay, so there's plenty there, but I need you to tell me if there's something left out on that you would like to work on, and that I will include. Now, I'm going to show you some pretty pictures, not all of them pretty, and not all as you might like. So here we have an assemblage of, you could call it glazed red earthenware. Okay, lovely pieces. But what I said right at the beginning was, I used a word and I said, I need you to bear in mind the context. Okay. Sorry, there's a line at the top there and I don't want to get rid of it in case I knock everything off, but I'll leave it there. All of those look like they're a glazed red earthenware in various different ways, but they cover a huge range of material and the context is completely different in all of them. So how do you tell where the piece of pottery has come from in the first place? Well, the first one is, and I come back to it over and over and over and over again, is the context. And I learned that lesson myself in the very hardest of ways, in that I was assisting on a site in Dublin when I was working on the material from Wood Quay. Now, many of you have heard me say this before, but it's worth saying it again. I would go down to this particular site in Dublin on a regular basis just to check, very large site, urban site, and I would go down and check through what they had just to see, you know, where they were on the levels as a quick dating mechanism. And I went down this particular day and I was shown a piece of pottery and I picked it up and I very stupidly assumed that it came from the site because it was given to me by the person in charge of the fines. And in good faith, I took it from her. And she said, I don't know what this one is. This one came up. And so I did my usual and I held it out and I had the piece of pottery in my hand and I said, well, it's a red earthenware. It's okay, there looks like there's mica in it. It's not glazed. It's very well made. It's very well finished. Went through the whole thing and said, you know, it might be Spanish, it might be Merida because they have that very fine glaze in them and that very fine mica in them and so on. Went through the whole thing. And I'm concentrating, as you know, I concentrate on trying to identify a piece of pottery. And I didn't realize that the fines person, a visitor and another person in the fines cabin were practically scraped off the floor laughing hysterically. It was a plant. She had planted a piece and she had been on holiday in Turkey and she had brought back a piece of Turkish pottery and put it into the tray with the other pieces. I learned a very interesting lesson that day, and that is when you're given a piece of pottery to identify what's the context. And that means literally just no more than not whether it was in the pit over there or the pit over there. What site did it come from? Where did it come from? What site was it on? Was it in Roscommon? Was it in Wexford? What am I likely to be thinking that it might be? Okay. And I never fell into that again. And it was a very, very good lesson to learn. And it's something you have to look at. If you're shown a piece of pottery, what site did it come from? Okay, it's not an anonymous piece. Where was it? It may have been a piece that was dropped in from somebody else. It may have, that's fine. People are traveling back and forth. There may be pieces that come in that are unusual, but what are you expecting to find on the site and what is actually there? And so your context is vital. You might think that people who work in fines are sometimes not thought of as real archaeologists. That's been said to me too. But we do know about the concept of a context, and it's vital for knowing where the pottery is from. So these 5 pieces I wonder if any of you think you know where they come from or what they could be identified as. Anybody want to stick up a hand and tell me what any of the pieces are? And remember, this is not a competition. This is a discussion. Any takers?
Hello, Derek Gallagher here.
Yes.
Top left, I think it's Irish or British, and red glazed earthenware.
Well done. Any idea of a date?
16th to 19th century.
Thank
Late
you.
16th,
Yep.
19th century.
Yeah, well done. Probably later than the 16th, probably in Ireland, later 17th. That you're absolutely right on that one. That's actually an English piece. And we think that the potters didn't really come over to Ireland until the later period, later 17th, into the 17th century.
Okay.
Primarily what we get in Ireland before that is supplied by North Devon. But they come over then at that stage and they start lashing out the pots. Very, very good, top of the class. Anybody else? Okay, I'm not going to put you through pain or feel miserable. That one is correct. And the one on the lower right-hand side is a similar piece. It's a basin or bowl made by English potters, late 16th to 19th century. It's glazed red earthenware or red glazed earthenware. Generally, Roseanne and I use the term glazed red earthenware. You can see that they're all red earthenware. You can see that they're all red earthenware, in fact. The piece on the top has a very nice finish in it. And also it's what we generally call, what the English call a panchion, although it could be shallower. You can see where it flares out at the top, small base on it, and it flares out, and it can be used for all sorts of things. Yes, a settling pan for the dairy. It can be used to, as I say, to wash the baby in it. It's a good, heavy, and very nicely made dish. Okay, the one in the center is a personal favorite of mine. I bought it in Morocco in 2000. It's a traditionally made large dish, and it's not actually glazed, but it's polished. And in fact, the potter was working on other pieces, and what they would have traditionally fired the pot and then put slip on top of it, and then polished the slip with a piece of leather or something like that. Sadly, since it was the 20th, 21st century, he was polishing it with a plastic bag. It's like, pretty naff. But he was making a huge amount of pieces that were polished like that. They don't refire it, but they put the slip on and it's burnished up in that same sort of way. So that one is only about 25 years old. Big, solid, traditional piece. The group on the right are ones that if the DVD, or if the, actually it's not on the DVD, but you'll see pieces like that. These are handmade in India. They're made 2 years ago. Certainly the video was made about 2 years ago. And they are very interesting pots, and you will see on the DVD, you will see some ways of how they make that rounded system. And then there's a slip put around the top of the pot, and then they're fired upside down and give a wonderful finish. And the piece on the lower left-hand side looks very similar to them. It's red earthenware, and it's got a black over the top, and it's been burnished. It's actually a piece from Egypt, and it's 6,000 years old. It's from 4000 BC, okay? And it fits beautifully with the rest of those pieces. So how do you identify them? You know what the context is. You know where they were found, you know what you're likely to be looking at, okay? So what I'm trying to get across to you is you must know where the pieces were found before you start identifying something. So we do a very, very brief outline of a pottery. I have changed because I was getting comments. I was inaccurate in what I had been saying previously. Ireland is essentially a ceramic between approximately 600 BC and 400 AD. Okay, why is that? We don't have pottery here. We know how to make pottery. You know, you've worked on it. You know, when you're working on prehistoric sites, you know, you have beakerware, you have the Neolithic, you have the Bronze Age. Now, we don't have Iron Age pottery here in Ireland, contrary to some comments, but I think Iron Age pottery has sort of faded out of popularity, shall we say. For some reason, pottery stops being made in Ireland, and yet before 600 BC, it was within the mainstream of European pottery, in that what was being made here was similar to what was being made in Europe. And I know we're not allowed to use the word beginning with C and ending with T, C-E-L-T, okay? It's not what you thought. We're not allowed to use the word Celtic. But the simple answer is there is a movement of people, there is a change of emphasis, whatever you want to call it, that comes across Europe and lands up in Ireland, approximately 600 BC. And whatever they, or whoever they were, the very simple thing is, if you talk to the language people in any of the universities, they will tell you that in the Irish was, the Irish language was developed from around that period, and there is no word for pottery in the Irish language. Okay, there is no word for pottery. It's a borrowed word. It's a word that is brought in, and therefore it's not something that was being used by these people who came to Ireland at that time. It's also not used in Scotland. Scotland was in the same position as us, and they don't have a word for pottery either. It's a borrowed word, so we have either pottery or crockery, one coming from England, one coming from France. Pottery generally comes from France. Crockery is an Old English word. So we don't have pottery in our language. And the analogy you would use is, within the Irish, you have names for what you use. So in Irish, you would have maybe 25, 30 words for rain, in the same way as the Inuit would have 30 words for snow, but they might only have one word for vegetable. Mind you, a lot of the Irish would only have one word for vegetable as well, potatoes. But, you know, we won't give them a hard time about that. So there is no word for pottery in the Irish language, and therefore it's not here. It's not being used. Did they know how to make pottery? Well, did they know how to use earthenware? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. In that, we know that they made crucibles, but crucibles are not tableware. They're not table pottery. They have chosen deliberately not to use that. We know that the people who came were metal workers, and we know therefore that they knew how to make crucibles which would withstand the firing, and would take the metal in them and would melt the metal, but they were not making tablewares at the same time. So it's something that I've been working on more recently. When I started out in Waterford, we would put the crucibles in with everything else we did. Actually, they don't belong there. They belong with the metal report. They're nothing to do with what I'm doing on tablewares. So I'm learning. You can learn lifelong, you can learn to move these on to something else, okay? The second thing that happens is the Romans arrive in Britain several times, but they stay on, they don't come to Ireland. Now, yes, okay, same old joke. If the Romans had come to Ireland, we would have had straight roads a long time ago. We don't. And so when I talk to them in England and in Europe, I say, well, not England anymore, but I say to the French and the Germans, thank you very much for the money that you gave us through the EU to straighten our roads. But we didn't have the Romans did your ones originally. So they looked at us and they decided we weren't worth the trouble, really, because they were looking for food, obviously, to feed the expanding Roman Empire. But as well as that, they needed natural resources. They had been coming, they knew about us, and they had been coming to Cornwall for the tin for many, many years, but we had no real natural resources that they could exploit. Otherwise, they would have been here. There's no question about it. But there was nothing really that they needed from us. In the same way, they got as far as looking over the edge to Scotland, and they built a wall. With us, they had the Irish Sea, and they didn't need to bother about us. Did Romans come here? Yes, they did. Okay. Did some of them settle here? Yes, they did. That's not the issue. Did they invade and take over the country? No, they didn't. They traded with us. We know of burials, and if there's a burial of a Roman, it means there were at least 2 Romans there, in that the second Roman knew how to bury the first one with the proper accoutrements and so on. So we know that Romans came, they visited, they traded, they brought bits and pieces back and forth. We have some pieces of Roman pottery at the Roman period. That's fine. That's not questioned. But they didn't come here. And therefore, their use of pottery, which was automatic with them, their dishes and their plates and their everything were very sophisticated, and we don't have that. Okay, so and we continued to not have that until about 400 AD, and probably 450 AD. And of course, the major change in Ireland I'll put it down as 432, but it's actually, we know, of course, well, those of us in the know that Christianity came to Ireland in West Cork and Kerry much before St. Patrick trawled up to around the country looking to, Christianize the rest of ye savages. But it was already down here in Cork and Kerry. And so that's the period when Roman style pottery comes to Ireland. Was it bringing wine for mass? It's hard to know. This is a reconstructed Roman kitchen. Okay, how close is that to? We would be very happy to have a kitchen like that. Pottery, glass, a large pot in the corner to contain flour or anything else. They would have a lid on that, actually. They would have shown a lid on it. You've got a whole series of different things that are, you've got pans for frying here. This sort of thing annoys me intensely, because anybody who's ever been out hunting, you know that you don't hang game in the kitchen. That the stench from that would have been absolutely appalling. You hang that in a cold store. Nevertheless, they have to seem to have to show it there. A woven basket with the logs for the fire, a good sized table to work at, a good shelf here on the side, a very nicely made fire where you can heat yourself, and you've got then a griddle on the top here, and you can cook without the heat burning the pot too much. onions wouldn't have been in there either, I have to tell you. These sort of amphora, some of them are the ones that would have held wine or almonds or any sort of storage pieces like this. Lovely jars, and most of these would have had a wooden, we call it a cork, a wooden bung in it to hold the liquid. And flatbreads being made here, little dishes, a whole series of dishes and tablewares, and of course the glass in the corner. Stunning, absolutely stunning pieces. And you contrast that with, I love the word troglodyte because it is so, but it actually means a cave dweller. But this looks almost like the Roman kitchen. But this is early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century in France, with all of these vessels, very much the same as what was in the Roman kitchen to start with. Here are his bricks. There's a fire in here. Everything is hung up on the wall again, hooks and so on. You can see the wooden bung in the top of this piece on the corner. You can see the tiles on the floor, not as grand as the Roman one, but you can see a whole variety of dishes and pots on the table used for various different liquids and so on. The caves were cut out of the cliff, and the result was they were warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and not the brightest lit, but extremely comfortable. So very, very briefly, this is what we will be going through. And so in medieval pottery on the island of Ireland, you have a situation where medieval period for us is post-Roman to post-medieval, which covers 550 to 1550. It's 1,000 years, is basically the medieval period. We used to call it early Christian, and sort of the idea is now, if you call it early Christian, you confuse other people where Christianity came in the year 1000. For example, the Norwegians, who are our closest people to us that we need to understand. And although we don't have Romans, it is post-Roman to post-medieval. At that stage, we have small-scale imports from the 5th to the 10th century. We'll look at those later, and more imports from the 10th to the 12th centuries. In the Northeast, we have souterrain from the 9th to the 16th century. Why pottery was made in the Northeast and not anywhere else is something that is being researched continuously. We don't know why it spontaneously emerged up there. There are suggestions. One is that they brought the making of pottery back from Scotland. That's hard to understand, considering they weren't making pottery in Scotland at that time anyway. So, and then in the rest of the country, you'll get a locally made pottery in the Anglo-Norman style from the late 12th to the mid 14th century, and that coincides with the official invasion of the country. From the 10th to the 12th, there's a huge amount of contact, and there's pottery coming in. But the ones that we need to worry about really more are this material here, the locally made pottery in the Anglo-Norman style, the late 12th to the 14th. We have the B-wares, and these are the sort of pieces that you're looking at. These very large vessels. Probably we're not getting anything quite as big as that, but they do look very impressive, and it's a wonderful postcard. These were dredged up from the sea. I think you can see, if you look quite closely, you can see the snaky shell sort of stuff on the side of it. And then you have, this tradition was continued and they still made jars in the same sort of way. And there's where your context is absolutely essential again. These date to the 17th century. They were found in Cork. Of course, you'll hear a lot about Cork when I talk, I'm afraid. These date to the 17th century. They come from Seville, and they are part of the wave of exploration to the New World, where material was being taken out. And Cork is one of the easiest ports to get into, to refill, to stock up with material, and head out then to across the ocean to the New World. And that's why you're finding them there. These were found in the 1960s, I think, when I think Professor Kelly found these ones when they were excavating in the city. And then our second group in that mid-period are the famous ewares. Very difficult to tell what they are unless you have a context, because the clay is the same clay as is being used in the medieval period, obviously. So you need to know the context in which they're found. And I'll just show you a little bit there, which we'll talk about those later. These are actually domestic wares. They're the first domestic wares that come into Ireland, in that you will have plates and bowls and lids, nice lid there, and they will fit on the top. They may have come in with a lid like that, and then it may be replaced by a wooden lid. Lid can be used upside down on it as well, of course. And then crannoge ware, the later sort of material. In this material in Northern Ireland, I'm just briefly showing you this one, you will see really a return to almost bucket-shaped pieces, almost prehistoric pieces. So very, very briefly on those ones, these are the unglazed wares that you have in Ireland for the first millennium. Bewares. Now, I'm using the old form, the old terminology for them, beware, but I've given you a reference. Ian Doyle, who's in the Heritage Council, is the person who's written a great deal about this material and has identified more correctly where the pieces are coming from. Okay, I see it's 11 o'clock. I'm going to stop there briefly, and I'll continue on afterwards, because we all need to have a little break and shake a leg, I think. Is that okay with you, Niamh?
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect.
Okay, everybody ready, and we'll go again. I just want to run through this piece very quickly, because we will come back to these and we will work through some of them. As I said to you, the beware has been very much worked on by Ian Doyle, and it's North African red wares, and they've been able to actually pinpoint a lot of the material by doing thin section and chemical analysis and so on. But I'm using the old term because when you read the older documents to find where the material is, most of it in fact comes from Cornwall and was identified by Professor Charles Thomas, and he simply added, and I'll be coming back to this again, he simply added to the potteries that were found on his site A, B, C, D, E, because he didn't know what they were, and he just put an alphabetical listing on them. And this was used quite a number of times then afterwards with the Dublin wares and others. And then there's a more up-to-date sort of way where we change them and make the names more descriptive. But you do have to know what is being meant in the older material, because you will be going back to some of that to identify and to look at where you are on your site and what material is being found. So again, very quickly, the eWare, there's a hard fabric, various colors and so on. Suit rainwear goes really quite late, and it becomes then the hand built, the everted, it was called everted rim and cranogware, but Cormac McSparran has done a lot of work on that, and he now calls it medieval Ulster coarse pottery. That it's pretty much the same tradition and same type. And then Leinster cookingware is the main one that is found in Ireland, mostly Leinster, slightly over the border as well, depending on how you look at it. A very specific identification here on the sand gritted basis, but has a huge range of vessels in it. And that is one that you absolutely have to know, whether you are in Cork or anywhere else. You're not going to get it in Cork, you're not going to get it in Galway or Limerick or anywhere like that, but you absolutely have to know what it is and where the boundaries are on it. This is one of the many postcards that Maurice Hurley has sent me over the years. And I use it to show two things. One is both why I like pots. Both pots and cats are very, very tactile, okay? And in many cases, you will only know a pot by actually handling it. It is a handmade piece. Yes, at a later stage, what we have is made by machine and poured out and very industrialized and so on. But to a great extent, there is a huge amount of hand labor still involved in it. No matter how disrespectful people can be to transfer printed ware and the generic, what is the word? Not generic, ubiquitous willow pattern. There are changes on it, and that pattern has been printed out, but it has been laid on by hand onto a plate and has been stamped on before being fired. So the hands have been working on that constantly. So it's a handmade piece. Now, I just want to run through a very short. Actually, what I'll do is, Niamh, do you think we could put in the DVD here at this stage and give them?
Absolutely.
This is a piece that Rose and I had used for a number of years in teaching in UCC when we did the only pottery course at university level in Ireland for about 15 years. Rose took care of the prehistoric, obviously, and I did the medieval and post-medieval. And Joanna Wren would come down then and give us a lecture on structural ceramics, tiles, roof tiles, floor tiles, and so on. And this is a short video that we found that is very, very interesting. It's based in Somalia. The sad thing about it is that everybody involved in it is now not only long dead, but dead in probably a horrible way. It's called the Potters of Borhebe in Somalia. It was made by the University of Florida back in 1990, I think. And it's a beautiful piece because it shows the collection of the clay, the preparation of the clay, the making of the piece. It shows the when we get our knickers in a twist over whether it was wheel thrown or whether it was hand made, there's no real dividing line. There's no real sharp sort of divide on it. Things can be finished on a slow wheel or various different things like that. And it shows the finished material, but it also talks about why people prefer the earthenware pots rather than metal pots that are available to them. it's a lesson to all of us that somebody would prefer something like that.
In the village of Bardale, the people have been making pottery for thousands of years. Of all the stories how they became potters, my favorite one is about Ramo Gudude. She was one of the village's ancestors from the rare Dewey, the people of the red sand. One day, as she was tending her animals, she found a handful of fine clay which she brought to her husband. He mixed it with water and threw it in the fire. The next morning, he found the clay had hardened. He realized they could make vessels with the clay. He told the clan elders about his experiment, and they decided to sacrifice his wife to guarantee success in making pots. And they did so. From that time onwards, the best pottery in the country has been made in Burhebe. Somalia lies on the Horn of Africa, where the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean meet. The Burhebe region is in southern Somalia. Burs are granite hills that rise above the plains. Hebe is potter's sand, so Burhebe means hill of the potter's sand. The community is made up of nomads and villagers. The villagers are mostly farmers, and the nomads are animal herders who settle in Burhebe during the dry season. They trade water and grazing rights for products like camel's milk and animal hides. Bardale is the largest village in the area with 400 people. Everyone does their trading here. Farmers and nomads trade their crops, milk, and other animals in the square, while the general stores carry imported goods. Their main crop is sorghum. Both men and women work in the field. Villagers live in huts which they built with sticks cemented with animal dung and sand from termite hills. Nomads live in animal skin huts because they are easier to pack up. The villagers' main occupation is farming, but they make extra money doing small jobs. One of these is pottery making. Of the 400 people in the village, only 20 are potters. All of them are men. Women do not pot because they never have. Tradition says that only men pot. Some of the potters work in their homes. Others, like Muhammad Isaac, pot in rock shelters that dot the base of Burhebe. Making pottery begins with mining the clay. This is a woman's job. They are usually members of the potter's family. To get the clay, you have to walk about half a mile west of the village to the clay pits. They are called dukes. No one person owns them. They are shared by everyone. Some women go to the dukes a few times a week, while others go every day except for Friday, which is the Muslim day of rest. It's common to see 3 or 4 women working in the dukes at any one time. Although they work independently, they find support in each other's company. When they have finished pounding and sifting the clay, the women have to get it back to the village. Sometimes they can get a camel or a donkey cart. Otherwise, they have to carry the clay on their backs. When the men get the clay, they mix it with water and leftover slip. Slip is the clay that ends up at the bottom of the potter's water ball after a day of rinsing hands and tools. They prepare fresh clay whenever they need it. In the busy season, this can be every few days. In the past, the potters made only 3 or 4 pots a day because the pots would be sold within the village or to people living nearby. They could not sell more because they could only travel by camel or on foot. So much has changed in the last 20 years. New roads and more trade. Today, 80% of the pots are sold to other regions of Somalia. So now, each potter makes up to 30 pots a day. Hussein Ibrahim is wedging his clay. He kneads the clay like you knead bread dough, pushing and rolling until he achieves the perfect texture. He says kneading is important to rid the clay of air bubbles, because if air bubbles are trapped in the clay, the pot will explode when it is fired. When working with clay, the potter's main tools are his hands and feet. He uses his toes to turn a wooden plate that rests on a pivot. Ina Ibrahim Abdi is starting a water pot. It is round-bottomed, like most of the pots he makes. So he starts on the walls and will put the bottom on last. For flat bottom pots, it is easier to put the bottoms on at the start. Then the walls are formed with potters. The potters can make the walls thick or thin. They make the thinnest walls for the cooking pots, because the thinner the wall, the hotter the pot can get without cracking. This pot is called idin. It is used to transport fire and to burn incense. Incense is very important to Somali men and women, but only women burn the incense. They use it to perfume their hair, their clothing, and their homes. It scents the air and sweetens their lives. Incense is so popular throughout the country that the Somali poet Galal wrote a poem about it to his new bride. He says, "I am a man who appreciates sweet-smelling things, so do not shrink from the use of incense. As long as you remain with me, never cease to use the incense burner. Enoch is adding a rim to the water pot. He makes the rim thicker than the rest of the pot so it will be stronger, because it is easy to bump the top when getting water. When the rims are finished, the pots are smoothed and pounded. The potters use a wooden strip to smooth the outside and a seashell to smooth the inside. After smoothing, the larger pots are pounded with a wooden paddle. The steps of smoothing and paddling allow the potter to turn a roughly formed pot into a refined piece of craftsmanship. Paddling removes hidden air pockets and compresses the clay, making it denser and stronger. Smoothing gives form to the pots. Ina is shaping this cooking pot. It grows rounder as he pushes the walls out with a seashell. This is a traditional Somali headrest, but the potters use it as a knee rest when they work the clay. When the pots have been smoothed and paddled, they are left to dry until leather hard. Then they are decorated. Each decoration has a name. The three diagonals carved from right to left are called halberd. Those carved from left to right are called jeef. If you ask, what do the decorations mean? The best answer is they mean burhebe. In most cases, you cannot look at the individual markings like halberd or jeef and find a message. Most of them do not mean anything by themselves. You must look at the completed pattern to find a meaning. The decorations tell you two things: what kind of pot it is and where it was made. When a Somali looks at one of these pots, they will know it is from Burhebe because of the design, since each region has its own decorations. The pattern will also tell them what type of pot it is, what it is used for. Here is one of the few times that markings do have meanings of their own. The marks that look like the letter H are Burhabe tribal symbols.
Finish.
You are probably wondering about the round-bottomed pots. Why are they round, you ask? They do present some problems, but so many benefits as well. The most obvious problem is they cannot stand upright on their own, but that is easily fixed. The villagers keep the water pots in their kitchens and sit them on stands or in a hole in the floor. The cooking pots are not a problem either. The villagers do not have flat stoves in their kitchens. They either use 3 rocks on the floor or a 3-pronged brazier. The pots fit on the rocks and braziers so they never spill. In fact, the rounded bottoms are quite popular with Somalis. They provide many advantages. When using the cooking pots, the round bottom allows the heat to pass evenly from the bottom to the top. This helps protect the pot from cracking every time a meal is prepared. Cooking pots are more popular today than ever. Some other clay pots are being replaced by metal, like the teapot, because the metal one is more efficient and easier to handle. But cooking pots are still highly regarded because many Somalis like the taste of food cooked in clay. Clay pots are 5 times cheaper to buy than metal pots. They make the food taste better and are economical too. As with the earlier steps in the process, great care is taken in finishing off the pots. They are not put aside until they look as perfect as if they had been thrown on a wheel. As a last step, handles are added to the pots that need them, like this brazier. Then the pots are put out to dry. They have to dry for at least 2 days before they can be fired. But the potters usually wait until they have at least 50 pieces. When they are busy, this is about twice a week. The fires are built on the outskirts of the town, where the smoke and the mess do not get in anyone's way. Ina's wife Hawa had just brought him burning coals in a fire pot. Sometimes the potter's wife will either help with the firing or do the entire process for their husbands. Other times he will fire alone, as Ina is doing since his wife must tend to their baby. Ina starts by giving the largest pots a good smoking to make sure they are completely dry before beginning the actual firing. You saw how much skill is needed in making the pots. Well, firing is even more of a challenge to be mastered. An unskilled firer can ruin an entire batch of pots if he misjudges the weather, stacks the pots poorly, or miscalculates the rate of burning. Kiln firing can last anywhere from several hours to a week, but open air firing like this takes only about an hour. The possibility of error is much greater, so precision and skill are crucial. Since the key to a successful firing relies on uniform heat, Ina places metal sheets on the windy side of the fire to even out the rate of burning. The villagers like to watch the firing. The children especially enjoy the sight. I have heard that some cultures have superstitions against viewing a firing, but in Bardale, everyone is welcome to watch, as long as they stay a safe distance away from the flames. Ina knows the pots are finished because of their color. Before they are heated, the pots are dark brown. When the maximum temperature is reached, they turn red and are ready to be removed. This young woman, Zuleha, is picking up her order for 2 water pots. The pots are of great importance to the community. After the men make them, the women put them to use. The various pots play an integral part in their daily lives. The women are responsible for preparing meals and gathering water. In fact, they do not allow men into their kitchens. The staple meal is sorghum and camel's milk. Sorghum is a grain that tastes like oatmeal. After being harvested, the sorghum must be pounded, then hurled, as Zuleha is doing, then ground and sifted. It is then mixed with water and cooked over an open fire. But first water must be gathered at the pond and carried back a half mile to the village. This is not easy work. The pots hold anywhere from 12 to 21 liters of water. Zuleha is grinding sorghum. She might cook it in a wawai bashal pot. Bashal implies a group of friends who come together for fun, and the pot is seen as another friend. Friendship is an important part of the women's daily lives. They enjoy doing chores together, like going for water. This is what they teach their daughters, to take care of themselves and to help each other. They teach them to run the household and to cook. They help them to grow up to become strong women who take pride in their work and life. The village women share similar roles with the nomadic women who travel through the area. Though they carry few possessions, the nomad women cannot do without their cooking pots. The 3 pots on the right are called braziers. They are used to cook with. Coals are burnt inside and the pot sits on top of the handles. Accidents do happen, and eventually the pots crack or break. They are repaired and reused when possible. When the pots become useless, they are thrown out. Some of the pieces get buried over time and will probably be dug up again in thousands of years by students of history. But for now, when the pots break, the potters make more, and they teach their children to make more too, so they'll always have pots to use. Ina is helping Abdullahi Masood learn to use his toes. It is a difficult task to master, but Abdullahi is a sharp boy, a fast learner. Soon he'll be as good as Ina, maybe better. And then Abdullahi will become one of the master potters of Burhebe, and he will pass the tradition on to his own children.
So I can't tell you how many times I've actually seen that, and it moves me every single time that I do see it. I don't think I've ever got over the casual way at the beginning where they say in order to make it really successful, they sacrifice the wife to start with. So, but there's a huge amount of learning in that very, very small, short 20-minute piece. You see somebody kneading and wedging pottery. You see the huge amount of work that has to go into actually collecting the clay. You see those men with terribly strong hands, kneading and wedging, and yet having really very delicate hands to do the work on the piece of pottery afterwards. You see the changes with the two of them. The thin wall on the pot, many times we see pieces that are made and we think, how did something possibly, how could it have been used? How could it have been made and used as a cooking pot over a fire? And yet it is. And the reason is because they will have the heat coming up to actually cook something. For them, then the incense pots, we look at it and we see women sitting there beating out that clay and so on. And you realize the reason they have incense pots is they don't have water to wash in. Okay. They don't have showers and baths every single day. They use incense to scent themselves, to scent the idea of is very Western, of having a shower, having a bath, using all that water. It's not possible to waste it like that. When you go through it and when she says, you know, the completed pot, you have to see the whole lot of it to see what the meaning is. And the meaning is not necessarily, there not necessarily is a meaning. When we look at a lot of the prehistoric pot, or we look at the pieces and we're saying, oh my God, you know, there's some sort of incantation on this, or no, there isn't actually. It's just a marking on it. And it may just mean that it comes from that place and no more. And sometimes I think in, certainly in prehistoric pottery, we tend to look for more than there is on the piece of pottery. The brazier is interesting, and I like the way he shows it at the end there. It's what we would know as a chafing dish, and I'll be showing you other chafing dishes as we go along. They're an absolutely outstanding form of cooking because it concentrates the fire into a very small space and doesn't allow it to flow out, doesn't allow it to, but at the same time, it gives you, if you have several of them, it gives you a series of rings on which to cook. And in the 17th, 16th, 17th, and 18th century, they were extremely popular as a means of cooking. It's interesting when people make comments in some of these. Yes, I'm sure the women do enjoy doing their chores together, but considering that you have 15 liters of water tied on your back and you're climbing out between rocks, I'm not sure quite how much enjoyment is involved in something like that. The sad thing is, of course, that that whole society and the prosperity that these people were looking at, the future of that in 1990 has been completely swept away now because of the situation in Somalia and so many other countries that we, it's just very sad. It is just very sad to see that gone. Okay. Do any of you have any comments on that piece? Did you enjoy it? Okay, I see nodding heads here. It is, I think it's a beautiful piece, and we have used it every single time. And I would have to say to you, both Rose and I have watched it intently every single time, because it is such a beautifully made piece. I have also, on the sheets that I gave you, I have also put a YouTube link to a longer piece, which I'm not going to use. It's about 50 minutes. And if you can have a look at it at some stage, it's for a modern potter who's working in a traditional manner. And it's really lovely to see the pieces. He's doing other things, he's glazing and so on, which these people were not doing. But he shows the clay being made. Just one last thing, looking at the way that the pieces are handmade and the pottery being stretched out and rolled into a long sausage like that. I will be talking later about, in the medieval period, French and English handles were made in a different way. And the French handles, what they did was they threw a cylinder, and then they cut it. And I have a drawing to share with you to show you how that is. And that's a really good way of being able to identify a French handle over an English or an Irish handle. The Irish handles tended to be rolled out or squeezed out this way and then made into a strap handle, although there were round handles as well, but your general ones are a strap handle, whereas the French ones would have lines on the inside. So it's a way of understanding those. Okay, if I close this and I come back to this, yikes, this is exciting. And I share screen on that again. Put it back as the slideshow. That's what I'm supposed to do. Does anybody have any questions? Or are you so bombarded with my dreary voice droning on for the last 2 hours that no, you've all got coffee, I can see. And there's an occasional smile. That's good. Thanks, Connor. That's always good. Hogan, your nice smile as well.
Hi, Claire. I have a quick question.
Yes.
Magdalene here. When they were doing the pots, at the very end, they were doing the bases. Can you hear me?
Just about. Where are you?
I'm in Kerry, the kingdom.
Oh, yeah. yes. Okay.
So when they were doing the pots on the video, they left the bases at the very, very last thing that they did. And I would imagine that would mean that the bases would be the weakest also, because like the handles were the last as well, and they are often the weakest kind of a element. How is it that it isn't the weakest? Because if it was, they wouldn't have continued doing it like that, I suppose.
Yes, because they are familiar enough with making sure that it's properly bonded into the rest of the pot. Okay, I know what you're saying about the handles being the weakest, but funnily enough, in medieval pottery in Ireland, there's only one area where jugs are being made where the handles are weak, and I have to say that's Kilkenny. The handles fall off. I don't have if you have a handle like that, okay, in Kilkenny, what you'll find is that the handle has come away from the top, and all you will have is a scar that's left. So clearly the potter in Kilkenny didn't know how to properly attach it. All the way around the rest of the country, what you will have is you will have a piece where you will have the top of the rim and the handle, part of the handle, still attached to it. Okay, so it depends on whether the potter is experienced enough in knowing how to actually make the piece. So he clearly knows how to bond it in, and he talks about beating it and hammering it to increase the density and to increase the support that goes into it. So they would have known very quickly whether it worked or not. And clearly it works for them that way. Yes, you can look at it every single time and think, how do they do that? But they do. Great question. Hope the answer is okay. Okay, so I want to go through some of these. There are a very short bit of bibliography that will cover the basics in what you're looking at. So you have Ian Doyle, I've referenced him several times, and that's a very nice piece that he's written in the Journal of Irish Archaeology, the Mediterranean and Frankish pottery imports. Mediterranean being B-ware, Frankish being the E-wares in early medieval Ireland. And so he covers that part, and he is the person to go to. So when you're looking at your specialist list, who you want to call, Ian Doyle is the person. And if anything comes into me, I simply put it in a padded bag and send it down to him, and he deals with it. The second one is, I have to say, Audrey Gahan and myself and Maurice Hurley wrote the medieval pottery from Waterford. Now, it is, there are several reasons why it's a really important assemblage of pottery. Firstly, it is the first group that was very well contexted. Several excavations had happened in both Dublin and Cork prior to that, and indeed Limerick and so on. But Cork and Dublin are really the important ones because of the depth of the material that was there. The difficulty was that in the 60s and 70s, the way material was taken off a site was very often in sort of 1 foot layers. It wasn't taken off in the same sort of way that we take off material now, or if I get it right, that ye take off material, because I certainly don't go out there with banjack's knees and take off the material. But you take it off by context now, whereas it was taken off in spits. And in Waterford, therefore, the material was taken off as in a modern way, and taken out. And so you had good context, you had good dating, you had all the material you wanted there, you had and a very, very fine assemblage of pottery. There's over 55,000 pieces of pottery from a 3-block site. It's a very large site, and it was dug right down to the bottom. And really excellent dating on the site from fantastic timbers, and it has allowed for everything else to be dated from there. All the other dating, whether you like it or not, is coming from Waterford. And so the previous sites in Cork, Skiddies and Christchurch, which had been excavated in the 70s, earlier 70s, in spits, they were dated from the material that we were working on in Waterford. And the Woodkey site that I was privileged to work on, that material, although it really wasn't contexted in much of a way, it is actually, the Woodkey site is actually the city dump. Although the name has been used to cover the entire area, Woodkey itself is not the Viking area. And so all of that was written with Waterford and the context in mind. And the variety of pottery that's in Waterford is also much wider than many other sites. It is missing the earlier material that is in Dublin, but I'm hoping to be able to write the earlier material, Christchurch and Fishamble Street, to add on to that. But it does come from the 11th with a continuous assemblage right through to the right through to the end, in fact, right through because there's a fabulous post-medieval report in that as well in Waterford, which I should put in there. That's very bad. But what is missing in Dublin, in fact, curiously, is the 12th century. And that's there in Waterford for you. So if you can get a copy of the Waterford report, then it's something you should have if you're trying to compare pottery and look at pottery. We've moved on with some of the pieces, but the basis is there. Ivans has written an interesting piece on Crannog and inverted rim pottery, but that has been, if you like, superseded by Cormac McSparran. I've given you his very short piece in Archaeology Ireland. I'm not saying it's the final thing, but he does write a useful an easily accessible piece where he talks about how Crannog and inverted rim are really the same thing within the same tradition, and that he now proposes to call it medieval Ulster coarse pottery, and that is the new name that is used. That is the name to be used. I have two pieces in there because it's my choice, obviously, but the first one is the medieval pottery in Dublin, dates and new names. And so when I talk to you about Professor Thomas in Cornwall using A, B, C, D, E, what has happened now is the names are being given to those various different pieces. So for example, C, I think, ended up being Sant Orange Green Glaze. Okay, so A wares, B wares, D wares are all sort of variants of B. A, B, and D are those Mediterranean. And then E-ware is still E-ware because we simply don't know what it is. It's Frankish, it's from Western Gaul, but more than that, we haven't been able to tie it down to where it comes from. But Ian is working on that all of the time. And then the medieval pottery from Wood Quay is what it says it is. It's from a very large assemblage of approximately, there was approximately 200,000 pieces there. And of that, I quantified and closely identified 85,000 pieces. And those are written up. And then anything that was from other parts of the site that were, for example, better or different from the areas that I was dealing with, those were included as well. It's a way of understanding how to deal with a very large assemblage, how to in my methodology, I worked about how I went through it, how I put the pieces together, and put material to one side for the museum to work on. And so I think, and certainly my reviewer felt, it was a really good way to actually lay out, these are my aims and ambitions. I didn't start out with those. As I worked through something and as I completed it, I put that back in as an aim, as in this is what I have completed. And that's perfectly fine to do that, okay? You can retrospectively put in an aim if you found that this is something useful that I've done. I plan to do it all the time, maybe. But it's a very organic sort of thing. So look at doing something like that. And also the history chapter, which I wrote while I was intending to do a PhD in Trinity at the same time as writing Wood Quay. Not the brightest button in the box, obviously. But I did get a very good history chapter from it, which was reviewed by the history graduate group in Trinity. It's a very much more, it's It's a much more difficult thing to do to present for history people rather than for archaeology people. Archaeology, you can throw up a couple of slides and talk about them. Can't do that in history. You had to have a written paper that would last 50 minutes, no pictures. Okay, so try that sometime. But it meant that I had material, I had to marshal it together, I had to work it properly, and I had to research it properly. And then the final piece there is Reinald O'Flynn, who he named Leinster Cookingware, okay? He gave it the name. He researched it. And that, so when you talk about Leinster Cookingware, for example, you don't say, Claire says that Leinster Cookingware is X, Y, and Z. You start with Reinald O'Flynn, who named it. This is what he says. Since then, excavations have happened, and now Claire McCutcheon has looked at these and has suggested that the dates are wider, as Reinald had said in his article. He said it may be that when more excavation has happened, it may be that it goes earlier and it goes later. And yes, it does. But I say that that's what he said. It's not a kind of coming in after somebody and saying, yada, 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 you didn't get it wrong, you didn't get it right. It's simply, as you predicted, as you studied at that stage, you then felt that it was earlier or later. In some cases, people have got the dates, what we would call wrong now, and that's fine. Ham green, for example, I'll talk about it later, but ham green is a type of pottery that you've heard about all your lives if you've been working on excavations in Ireland. And when you read Ken Barton's story about it and his excavation, he had a certain dating on it. While we were excavating in Waterford, while the excavation was, not me, while the excavation was being carried out in Waterford, enough dating came to light, and we were finding that the material didn't fit into his dates, but at the same time, they were excavating in Bristol itself, in the suburb of Redcliffe, and they found timbers there that then matched with the dating that we were finding in Waterford. And so the dating was reassessed and reassigned. But you have to be aware where it came from first, what they were talking about, what sort of dating they were talking about, but who and when was that dating reassessed, and names changed on various different things. Okay. Okay, so I just want to very briefly run through a little bit, since we were looking at fabrics and things like that this morning. I want you to understand that word fabric is what we use for pottery. It's not what potters use, okay? Potters they call it the body. It's archaeologists use the term fabric for the clay and the inclusions. Some inclusions happen naturally and some are added into. So temper is material that's added in, but inclusions happen naturally. So for example, when we look at Leinster Cookingware, you'll see that what is in that is mica and quartz. And they're very, very evident, okay? And they're very easy to see, but they are already in the clay. Whereas if we look at North Devon gravel tempered ware, the quartz has been deliberately added into something like that. And that's why we call it tempered. Practically all the fabrics, there's very few where something has been deliberately added in, okay? Mostly stuff has been taken out in order to make it finer and make it easier to work with. As you saw those, the preparation of clay in the Somali potters, you can see how they were beating the clay down first and then sieving it to make it very, very, very fine, to take everything out of it. Fortunately, when the medieval potters are making pieces here, they start out with a fairly rough clay. And what I'm hoping is that as you look at material that's on your site, you will see that it goes from coarse to less coarse to fine, and that is your chronology. That it makes it easier for you to get chronology on it, rather than ABC or 1, 2, 3, which is another one that was used. Now, grog is broken pottery, which can be added. I don't think I've ever seen grog in the pottery that's made in Ireland. Some people will use it, but it may be in English pottery much more so, but it's not. We don't generally see it. It may be more used in prehistoric pottery, for all I know. I'm not going to try and tell you anything about that. So it depends on what you're working with. So those are very straightforward, and you will know those, and we'll come back into it. But I just wanted to give you some of the words that are used straight off, so that you have an idea of what's there. Okay, Niamh. There's a couple of ways in which you can actually determine where the clay is coming from. And one of those that everybody will know is we talk about thin sectioning and so on and so forth. Thin sectioning is fine insofar as it goes. It depends on what you have. If it's a coarse sort of material and you can pin it down, you have to have some sort of idea as to where it's coming from in the first place, and you need to try and collect clay from that area and put the two together. What is being done, and what I've been using a lot of, is chemical analysis, or ICP-AAS, and I'm not going to try and print out all the words that are in that, they're deadly. But one of the difficulties we have in Ireland is that we have whitewares, and whitewares that come into Ireland, by and large, not exclusively, but by and large, come from France. And so we need to try to define where they're being found in France. In England, especially in Eastern England, which is close to France, obviously, and therefore has whitewares, they have pottery that's made in a white clay. So what they have to try to figure out there is it pottery made in a white clay made by English potters? Is it made by French potters who come to England? Or is it French pottery made in France and brought to England? So they have to separate out those ones. What I'm a step ahead, which is useful for me, in that what I'm trying to find out is I'm piggybacking on them, and I'm trying to find out which of my whitewares, where do they come from in France? I know they're French. And we've been able to pinpoint some. Is it important? It's not, you know, in the scale of things, it's not. But we have a different trading system than they do in England. And so I'm trying to trace down where we're getting things separate to England. We're certainly getting quite a lot of material before the Normans arrive. And then it becomes more of a homogenous sort of thing. But we're getting quite a lot of material before the Normans arrive. And so I want to find out where they come from. Okay, again, I am going to read a little bit of this, although you can perfectly well read it itself. And it's something of which been, so there's the two attributes. There's the fabric, where it's from, and we've discussed that now, and the overall shape and the character, rims and handles, the style of decoration, the form, okay? And so the potters of Berhaby, really their decoration, it just says, this is from Berhaby. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else other than that. And I was taught by Morris, you never look at the decoration for, you know, where something comes from. Actually, you take everything together. You look at the bits and pieces, you look at what's there to come up with an identification. Always with their context in the background, okay? So it indicates when and how a pot was made and used, as well as serving to define. This is the context, the start of the universe and the world, and God is starting to make various different things and having fun. And that's what pottery is about, really. It's about having fun. So where the clay comes from, how it's made, who made it, how they decorated it, and where it went from there. Okay, next. Okay, heavy going stuff again. An interpretation of pottery based on a detailed characterization. Okay, sound quantification, consistent approaches that facilitate comparison between assemblages. Okay, I would like you to read these a couple of times because this is very densely written. So this is what we're trying to do with the pottery. We're not just turning around to you and saying, you know, there's 10 jugs and the whole assemblage dates to the 13th century, yada yada. What we're trying to say for you on your site is this is a domestic site. They clearly had contact with the outside world. This piece was curated constantly for much longer than the piece would have been in production. We want to tell you something more about your site other than just, you know, you've got 400 pieces of pottery and the whole thing is a pile of rubbish and nobody's going to take it anyway. Okay, bear that one in mind. If the study of pottery is to reach its full potential, it is vital that it is recovered and analysed to a high standard. Okay, recovered to a high standard as well. Make sure that you get it in from exactly where it came from. I had material came to me at one stage from a very well-known company, and they sent me pictures of the site, and they said there are pits on the site, and the pottery came from the pits, but we don't know where the pits are on the site. And, you know, what can I do except quantify the type of pottery that was in those pits? And really quite a useless exercise, just box ticking in the end. So what I've done as well is I've put the references there if you want to go looking at some of them. And if you go on to the last one, the next one then, Liv. This is the one that it's 52 minutes. It's a village pottery in Andalusia. It's really well worth looking at, you know, especially tomorrow morning if things, no, we're going to do very well tonight. There's not going to be any problems with it at all. But sit down in a quiet moment and have a look, because some people learn by reading, some people learn by listening, some people learn by pictures, and if you do all three several times, it just helps. Okay, we'll go on to the last one. There's a cross-looking cat there. It's slightly out of focus because it's set into an alcove, and so the birds all around it are sort of at an odd sort of angle, but it is nonetheless a cat. And I come back to that is why I like pottery. I like handling it. I like being with it. I like turning out the boxes. I like seeing the pieces and seeing what's there. Okay, so if we open it to questions, you've listened quite enough to me now at this stage. I want your feedback. I want you to get back to me and say that was a load of bothersome nonsense. I was disappointed. I wanted to hear about. I do want to add in this. I want to put that in. We have more sessions and we will cover everything that everybody wants. Okay, it's difficult with a large group and it's difficult when we're not in person. And it's even more difficult in that I can't see any of you while I'm talking to the screens. Is there anything you want to ask me about now so that we can go through anything very quickly? Is there something that is bothering you? I will be showing you pieces of pottery on the screen And I've worked with Lauren and Faith, and I worked with Elaine and Laura over the last year. And I think we've managed where I've got a decent piece and I can bring it up to the screen and show you. I want you to bring pieces that are bothering you, to say something that I may be able to help you, or the group may be able to help you, to say where it comes from and so on. So does anybody have any questions? Or have you all blanked your screen and gone away to have lunch early?
No, not really. Can you hear me, Claire?
Yes, I can.
I started as an anthropologist long time ago. But yeah, the thing about pottery doesn't have to mean the decoration. That's it's reassuring to hear someone actually say that, because like we dig up like prehistoric urns all the time and people get so bogged down in, my God, you have to know exactly what they were thinking when they made that. They were making a pot. That's what they were thinking. So yeah. But yeah. That's all.
Sometimes, as they say about Freud, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Yeah, I will try and get that in a report sometime. But yeah.
It will be cut out, fortunately. I know, because when I did my master's, I had a quotation at the beginning of each piece, and I got away with it, but I did try to say something about the handles, because I was finding that all the handles were on one side of an excavation and none on the other side. And I used the famous phrase ritual deposition. And Elizabeth Tuig was my internal supervisor, and Morris saw it first, and he said, I know it's funny and I know it's true, but I don't think you should put it in there. You know, it won't get you any marks for that lot. So, but I still feel it was ritual deposition, in that they were breaking their handles and throw them in next door. It just means it was made somewhere. Okay, anybody else awake there still?
Claire, can I ask a stupid question?
No, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Oh, wait for it. The something that always gets me when I'm trying to talk to students and that is they go, why when wheel throwing starts does hand throwing continue?
Because the pots were very often better made and they were accustomed to them. They were used to them. There's a particular type of pottery that we get here in Ireland, which is from, depending on where you are, it's from North Wiltshire or Gloucester. I think it's called Gloucester in Dublin a lot of the time, mainly because somebody came by and said, oh, we have those in Gloucester. But it's actually North Wiltshire minty type. And we get it, and it's handmade, and it continues right up to the 16th century being handmade. And I was horrified when I went to the Ashmolean at one stage with Maureen Mellor, who's one of the experts there in Oxford. And I see the same pot that I would see in 12th century in Ireland. And I said, why is that in a 16th century? And she said, because when they were no longer selling them to the West, they kept coming to the East, and they liked them. That's what they used. That's what they wanted. That's what they were accustomed to. We have a difficulty here in that ham green glazeware was hand built and was made for a very long time, up to 1250. What I'm trying to prove here is that when the English potters came over to Ireland, they didn't have anybody as a roadblock, if you like. They were coming into an open market. And so I think some of them got smart and decided, well, we don't have to make it hand-built if we don't want to. And I think that the pottery that was made in Ireland by the Anglo-Norman potters from around, certainly around 1200, I think they started making wheel thrown of their own choice. They brought in the initiative at that stage. But when I say that in England, they say, oh, Irish, you always have to be, you know, smart about everything. We have to be, and I say, no, it's your pottery. It's English pottery made in Ireland. I just think that since there was no competition, that they started making pottery on the wheel more quickly than they did in Bristol. Does that?
No, it does. I mean, I'm one of the sad people who likes Leinster cooking ware, but it's sometimes hard to explain to a third party. Yeah. No,
Well,
I get what you're saying.
It's very simple with Leinster cooking ware. They made every sort of vessel you could possibly want, okay? They didn't have glaze, which was poisonous. Lead glaze was poisonous at that stage. So they didn't glaze, and they had all the vessels you needed. They had jugs, they had dishes, they had platters, all of these, which were not being made by the people who were making the glazed wares. And it was possibly cheaper, we don't know, than the wooden vessels. We don't have the costings for a lot of these things, which is a major problem, really a major problem. Okay.
I have a quick thing that I'd like to signpost, if that's all right, Claire. It's not a question.
Okay.
I've just got back from the Alentejo region in Portugal, and they actually still make a lot of handmade pottery based on how it was done in their sort of medieval traditions.
Yes.
And it's really quite cool. If anyone ever gets a chance to go out there, I was lucky enough that actually the town in which I was working had a medieval fair on the Friday and Saturday, Sunday I was out there. And there was a guy there who was making pots by hand for everybody to see. And it was really, really interesting, really beautiful glazed red earthenware. I'll type it in the chat because Portuguese is one of those languages. It's not, well, like Irish, it's not pronounced how it's written, and it's quite confusing. So
Yes.
I'll write it down in the chat. But it was a really, really great opportunity if anyone's ever in Portugal.
Super. Thank you, Laura. That reminds me that is a ware that we used to call Merida type ware, and people will know of it. It's no longer called that because a lot of research has been done on it. It's an area that's just on the edge of Spain and Portugal. And in fact, it's now being renamed as Portuguese courseware. But what we do is in a report, we would put both names so that a lot of work has come out of Spain in the last, Spain and Portugal in the last number of years. And for example, there are pieces of pottery that were known, we have some in Ireland, which is quite extraordinary. They were known as the place that they were first found in the Caribbean islands. So there's one that was called Columbia Plain because it was found in Colombia in the islands there. My brain is dying, sorry. But it's now, there's a white one and there's one that is called, it was known as polychrome, but it's now known Isabella polychrome for the town of Isabella. That's a better one to say to you, but it's now known as azul y morada, which is the Spanish name for blue and purple. And if you can get your head around that one, that's exactly what it has on it. It's not actually polychrome. It is specifically two colors, blue and purple on it. And what people are trying to do is have a better name on something which describes it. But you have to know what it was referred to so that you can read the older literature to find out what's happening.
Yeah, just a quick one there in the chat if nobody saw it. If you get a chance, they actually make a lot of wine in the Alentejo region, and they use the traditional medieval techniques still, not only to make the pots, but also with the wine production. And they're made in these really big pots called talas, which are basically, you see those really, really giant Roman amphorae that are like, I don't know, 12 centimeters diameter, these really, really big pots. So if, you get a chance, go out there and sample the wine. It's great.
It's not very Ryanair friendly, is it? hiking something back on your backpack. That's the problem. Yeah. I
Well, they do a flight from Dublin to Faro. So that's always an option.
It's an option, yes. I was on my way back from France at one stage and had 2 bottles of Saint-Emilion in my backpack and realized, unfortunately, that Ryanair were going to take it from me and that even I couldn't drink it by the time I'd get on the flight. So I met a nice young French couple and offered it to them. And my French is good enough to say to them that I would like them to have it. And the curious thing was, it shows the history of France. And I explained who I was, that I was Irish and I had been visiting and so on. And they looked at Saint-Emilion, and because, of course, it's near Bordeaux, they said, English wine. Now, who knows their French history? The English took over Bordeaux back in the day, and a lot of the French see that as an English enclave still. So, but they were very happy to have my 2 bottles, very nice Saint-Emilion. I mean, I spent about £10 on each one, and £10 buying Saint-Emilion in Saint-Emilion was good wine, you know. And fortunately, it was St. Patrick's Day, so they could toast me. Okay, anybody else with lovely smiles. I should have moved that one along a long time ago. Hi, Elaine. And okay, we'll think about, email me, send me questions, send me additions, send me comments, anything you can there. I haven't looked at the, I suppose I should look at the chat room or whatever. 23 chats, oh Lord. Okay, Niamh, can you save those chats and send them to me?
I can, yeah, I can.
Yeah, okay, and I'll go through those later. And is there anything on that? You've been looking at those. Is there anything on that I absolutely need to answer right now?
No, a few have been answered by the chats, and some of them are just kind of comments about enjoying the video, things like that. But I'll send them on to you anyway.
Okay, that's great. I'm not capable of doing that. Okay, not to end on a bummer note, but I just did want to say to you that the reason I'm doing this is partially because I want to write the booklet, but partially because of, as well as that, because of my age and life's uncertainty. Many of you will know that my older sister, not much older, died very suddenly in March. And it really brought things into focus for me in that I really want to do this. I want to finish writing the booklet that I've been talking about for the last 25 years at least. And I want to be able to teach people to, within their own company, have the confidence to identify pieces of pottery so that you don't have to depend on a specialist all of the time. Because I have other things that I want to be able to do before I pop my clogs and fall off my perch. And some of them involve actually sitting down and writing rather than doing short reports into 25 shards of glazed red earthenware, however nice it is, and it is nice, or 20 shards of medieval pottery. I want to be able to just clear my head, clear everything out of here. I want to do the second book for the National Museum on the earlier pottery, so that goes out as a companion with the later, so that you've got the 10th, 11th century, and then you've got the 13th, 14th in the other wood key book that goes along as a companion there. I am being hounded, quite rightly, to finish rewriting the pottery from Dublin Castle, which is about to go to another very large volume now. Ken Wiggins is working very hard on that, and I have to absolutely finish that. It's difficult to do because I'm rewriting somebody else's material, whereas Roseanne is simply bringing up to date hers. Fortunately, the material was written very, very well. I want to, as I say, do the booklet for everybody to take in their hand. And then the fourth thing I want to do is my father rescued a very large group of estate papers from the Devonshire estate, and which was here in Bandon. They owned all of Bandon. And there's material mostly 19th century, but going back as far as the late 17th and up to the early 20th century. And I want to put that all in order and publish it and have it properly catalogued in order to have it as a deposit somewhere, rather than simply dumping the material into an archive space. So all of those would take a year each. So I have to be realistic in how much I can do, and how much I need to do. And so I need you all to step up to the mark and start doing your own pottery. And maybe one or two of you, it doesn't have to be a huge amount more. I have great hopes for some, but maybe one or two of you will like to go on and actually specialize in the pottery and to take on the really wonderful, interesting material that is out there, that turns up every single time that you go out on site. I went to a site 2 weeks ago in Cork, and it's got the bog standard, it's got North Devon, it's got North Devon gravel temperate, it's got everything. And as I was standing there on site, it also had medieval, which is why I was called in. But as I was standing there, one of the people came off the site with a handful of pottery, and it's actually part of a plate, pieces from a plate from Montelupo in Italy, on the side of a hill in Cork, in a rural site. And it's like, what could be better than being able to see something like that and know what it was and know what date it was? So if we can get half a dozen of you, you know, to carry this on. Roseanne is also retiring from working on the pottery. And so we want to have material that's left, so next group coming along don't have to reinvent the wheel in many ways that we had to do, and to keep going with it. Okay.
And then Claire, just my very last question for you. Do you mind if I forward on today's slides to the group? Is that okay?
Oh, that's perfect.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll circulate them on Mondays that as well.
That's perfect. I thank you so much, Nia, for all the work you've done on this. I would like to have, if we can, I would love to have a handling session where we can actually physically handle the material. And I am up for, Niamh, I'm up for splitting that into two and having it where people can manage it. I will travel to the place and I will drag my pots and pans with me. Since I'm old and decrepit, I have free travel, which is not very, not great for the rest of it. But it would be possible to have a central location or two central locations. And if people come up with an idea, then I will absolutely travel and bring pots, and we can handle the stuff, or bring your own and we can look at it. You know, we can pass it around. All right. So bear that in mind as well.
That's perfect. Look, we can follow up with all of that then and see what people prefer. If actually people want to suggest locations as well, please do, and we can see if we can make that work too.
If it's any help, obviously we'll be more than happy to provide a room out in UCD, although that mightn't suit everybody, but it's a backup if nothing else.
Thank you. Thank you,
Conor.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think on that note, we might let you go. Get ready to enjoy this evening's festivities. Claire, I know you've got a plane to catch as well. So thank you all very much for giving over your time this morning to be here. And we'll follow up with you next week and be in touch soon. Okay.